Hey everybody, it's Lisa here from the Tulsa Zoo for another Tour Tuesday, and we are talking about reptiles this week. And you may have already heard a little bit about reptiles from Gabby and Keaton yesterday. We're here in the Lost Kingdom building talking about some of our reptiles that we have here, and we have a lot of reptiles at the zoo. In fact, there are reptiles all over the world on every continent except for Antarctica. So let's talk about some of our aquatic and semi-aquatic reptiles right now. Our Lost Kingdom Chinese alligator over here is wading in the shallows. That is one of the things they specialize in. That is how they hunt, and they are predators and they are carnivores. They have a couple of different types of teeth. Some of their teeth are for tearing, so good for hunting something that's on the land and they can ambush them from out of the water. And then they also have some crushing teeth that help them break open things like oysters and snails, because they like to eat those too. One thing that's great about all reptiles, they do have scales and bony plates. So they have more bony plates than their American alligator cousins. They actually have bony plates all around, so they're armored even on their belly. That's really good protection for them. They get to only about 4.5 feet, so this Chinese alligator is almost fully grown. The males will get a little bit larger at 5 feet. They also lay eggs, like a lot of birds lay eggs. These reptiles lay eggs. Not all reptiles lay eggs. Some snakes can actually give live birth. They are very good mothers. Chinese alligators and American alligators, they will go on land to lay their eggs, and once they hear their hatchlings being hatched, the hatchlings will cry out to their mother, and she'll go over and cover them up really quickly with some leaf litter to disguise them from anything that would want to make a meal out of them. And then if they're having trouble getting out of their egg, she'll actually crush the egg in her mouth a little bit to break up the shell and roll them around to help them get out of that shell. She'll spend a lot of time taking care of her young and making sure that they're well tended to. And in fact, her young will stay with her through the first winter of their life. They do burrow for part of the year. They have a season where they do what's called brumate, and it's kind of like hibernating, but they don't fully go to sleep. So they just lower how much food they need, and they take a long rest in those deep, wide burrows. Something else about this reptile and all reptiles is that they do have backbones, and they also have lungs. So a lot of people think if they're in the water that they don't need lungs to breathe and that they have gills like fish, but that's actually not true for reptiles. All reptiles, even if they live in the water, they have to come to the surface to get some air to breathe. So if you look over here on our bank over here on the left, we actually have some yellow-headed temple turtles. So they are like any other turtle. They have a top shell and a bottom shell. Those shells are actually attached or fused to their backbone, so they are part of their skeleton. And they do have an outer covering on those skeletal plates that is a lot like the material your fingernail is made out of. And you might be wondering if they can feel anything. Well, they actually can. So if you take your one finger on one hand and you rub it across your fingernail really quick, you can actually feel that on your fingernail. They can feel things too. These turtles actually eat a lot of plants. They like to snack on plants, and they do get a little bit of small snails and insects and things like that in their diet. And when turtles are born, they eat a little bit more differently than they do whenever they grow up into adults. But these animals will also bask. So we've talked about how animals bask to get sun. They do need sunlight, but they also need shade too. So one of those turtles is representing a great way to get some shade under that cliff. They can't control their body temperature, so just like our Chinese alligator will go into brumation, which is their type of hibernation, these turtles will spend less time out in the sun if they get too hot. So they all seek shelter. And if we look over here, we actually have some southern river terrapins down here. We have several of them. And somewhere in there, there's a giant Malaysian river turtle as well. You also heard a little bit about the difference between turtles and tortoises, but One thing about these turtles that you might notice is they have those great webbed feet that are paddle shaped. Those help them swim around. They can come out on land, especially when basking, but those feet really help them swim all over the place. Terrapin is kind of another name for turtle. A lot of terrapins, these included, like to spend time where the ocean water or the salt water meets up with river water, and that water is called brackish water. They're specialized in that way. They will swim upstream into fresh water whenever they need to get food or when they're breeding. Something else about these terrapins that's really cool is they can change their color, the males can, when it's breeding season. So they change the color of their eyes from a golden yellow to a bright white, and their heads become really blackened and dark. And they're coming over to say hi to us right now. So they are underwater, but they do still need to come up for air and breathe. But they have really cool structures around their lungs. They actually have bony cages around their lungs that keep their lungs from getting crushed, and it makes them excellent divers so they can dive to pretty deep depths. Thanks, turtle friends. Have fun diving around. And over here, we have one of the largest lizards. It is a Komodo dragon. This is our female Komodo dragon. And right now she's up front on her heated rock. And you'll also notice she has light coming in. She really needs a lot of heat and light. Where she comes from is kind of a tropical place, the Komodo Island in Indonesia. There are a couple of smaller islands that Komodo dragons also live on, but they're most common on Komodo, which is where they get their name. And you might be wondering, why is their name dragon when they're not dragons, they're actually lizards? Well, some people think that their tongue looked like the fire from a mythical dragon's mouth, and that's where they got their name. Their mouth is really interesting and special, and they use it for one of their biggest hunting strategies. So they are also predators and carnivores, and they can eat a lot of different things. They will eat snails and things like that, but they prefer to eat larger prey items, even some small deer, if they can get a hold of them. They have 50 different type of bacteria that live in their mouth, and those bacteria cause a lot of problems when they bite into their prey, and it causes them to go into shock. And if that's not enough, on their lower jaw, they actually have special teeth that have venom that they inject, and that venom is thought to keep the bleeding going so that the animal goes further into shock and they can consume them. So they're really good predators. They even have those great claws that are for grabbing and digging, and they're really, really sharp. So they also can bury themselves much like the alligators, but they only do it to sleep in and get cool in. So theirs isn't seasonal like the alligator. They have a burrow that they can dig in, and if you'll look around her enclosure, you might notice some places where she has been digging. That just is a place where she can get a little bit lower into that cooler soil or sand, and that helps her cool off when she's too hot. You might notice her great scales all over her body. One thing that's neat about Komodo dragons is their scales help them blend in, but they also have bony plates underneath them called osteoderms. And what those do is they help defend the dragon from, well, other Komodo dragons, because they like to fight to establish territory, especially males during breeding season. They will, however, come together peacefully. Whenever one Komodo dragon has been successful at catching prey, they share their food. Isn't that nice of them? So they can also run up to 12 miles per hour, which is pretty great for the world's largest lizard, because they are about 5 to 6 feet long, and then they can even get up to 10 feet long and weigh up to 366 pounds. Average is about 150 to 200 pounds for an adult Komodo dragon, and they don't reach adulthood until they're 10 years old, and they can live anywhere between 30 and 50. She's very alert right now. these alligator, once they have laid their eggs, they actually kind of bury them in sand to keep them warm, and they rely on the sun to warm the eggs. And they will just leave their eggs and let their eggs hatch. As soon as the Komodo offspring hatch from their eggs, they will quickly seek shelter and run into trees, and that's because even larger Komodos will try to make a meal out of them. The baby Komodos will also cover themselves in feces to make them less appetizing too. So a lot of people have noticed that Komodo dragons are very in tune with their environment, and they can sniff things out. They have a really good sense. We talked about the Jacobson's organ with our ball python. Well, the Komodo also has that. So if they injure an animal and it doesn't pass away right away, they can track it down with that really great forked tongue. And it's forked because each side has receptors that will tell it which direction to go when they pick up that scent. Well, that's our Lost Kingdom reptiles. I hope you guys have enjoyed our Tour Tuesday. Be sure to come back for story time tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.